Good evening, and thank you for being here today. My name is David Bennett, and I'm Vice President for Development and Alumni Relations at Howard University. 2020 was certainly an extraordinary year, both in terms of the loss and pain felt by so many in our community, and also by some of the remarkable comings together that happened as well. We're excited to begin this new semester to give you a preview of what's happening at Howard University and what we anticipate in the months and year to come. I'm very excited by some of the new projects coming out of the Alumni Relations Division, designed to support all of our alum wherever they are at any stage of their lives. In just 2 weeks, over 600 alums registered to be in a Bison business directory, with free access for you to find other alums to support in growing their business and meeting your needs. The Howard University Book Club has thousands of participants for each of our quarterly books. And I want you to note, not only is there no cost for either of those, but the book club is also open to your family and friends who you may want to participate as well. We are expanding the number of these alumni insight calls that we have each semester, including one with the Director of Intercollegiate Athletics, Carrie Davis, that will be on the schedule for later this month. And finally, look for expanded programming around our Howard Business and Professional Development Program, Howard Works, and an expanded series of She's Howard programming, speaking to many of our outstanding female alums. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce two sons of Howard. The first is Keith Alexander, Howard University graduate and a Pulitzer Prize award-winning journalist, beginning his 20th year at the Washington Post. And the second is a three-time son of Howard, our 17th president, Dr. Wayne A.I. Frederick. Keith, the floor is yours.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Mr. President, thank you very much for having us here, and we're looking forward to a very interesting and revealing hour-and-a-half discussion.
Sure. Thanks for agreeing to do this. I appreciate it.
And so let's talk a little bit about some of the things that we're going to be discussing tonight. I want to give a little some highlights. We'll be talking obviously about COVID. We'll be talking about Howard graduation and homecoming. We'll be talking about the finances and the impact of COVID on the university. We're going to talk about the Howard Forward strategic plan moving forward. And yes, we're going to talk about some of the controversial things as well. The new head of the Howard magazine and other things that have been the subject of discussion on social media. I have a list here of dozens of questions and concerns from alumni that have been turned in and submitted. And we will get to as many of these as we can. But as the moderator for the evening, I'm also gonna take a little privilege and even go off script a couple of times. And I'm sure that just made the Howard University administration gasp with concern. But I guarantee you it won't be too bad. One of the first things I do want to talk about is something positive. Mr. President, I want to talk about the inauguration. You were the special guest of a Howard alum, our new Vice President of the United States, Vice President Kamala Harris. Can you talk a little bit about that? The first time a Bison is in the White House, and the first time that anyone, a graduate of HBCU, is in the White House.
Yeah, very special moment, as you could imagine. I think Vice President Harris represents the best of what we have to offer in so many ways. I know there's a lot of focus on her race, her ethnicity, her gender, but the reality is her charisma, her intellect, and her experience are what got her there. And I think that over the course of her tenure, the rest of the country and the world are going to get a chance to see that. And that's what I'm excited about. The event itself was, as you can imagine, both humbling and overwhelming. Very special day because of COVID restrictions and, the less people there, it was very intimate as well. And I am definitely, have a soft spot for Amazing Grace, which is a song I probably first heard and recognized from my father's funeral. As a 3-year-old, and every time I hear that song, it conjures up a mix of emotions. And while I thought that was the highlight, then I hear the young lady, Ms. Garment, give her poem was just absolutely thrilling. So it was a very, very special day, and I was certainly honored and humbled to be a witness in person.
And not only was a bison being sworn in, but Howard University also represented during the parade. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was special. We had touched base with Delaware State President Tony Allen, who was the head of the inauguration committee, and we went back and forth making some suggestions of things we would do. And two of the things that we put on the table was having the band escort the vice president, and the other was our intent to ring the bell initially at the chapel, and then we thought we'd do it at Founders 49 times in honor of the 49th vice president. He thought it was a great idea, and it was covered national news, and so it was great. And it was great, obviously, to have the band support the vice president. And obviously, if we were going to do that for the vice president, it was fitting that University of Delaware got to do that for the president as well.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for that. Let's talk obviously about COVID. Obviously, it's been in the news and in the media that Howard University is one of the few places out there that's picked to actually distribute the vaccine. If you talk a little bit about how that is going and when Howard began and how even Howard was even picked to distribute the vaccine.
Yeah, so the distribution of the vaccine is a complicated one. This is a very unusual circumstance. Everything about the pandemic, as you can imagine, has been unusual. Vaccine distribution has been controlled by the government to states, and in our circumstance, to the District of Columbia. And then health officials here determine who should get it, and then they do their distribution to the rest of us. We then use those guidelines that they set up in terms of who should be vaccinated. It started with our healthcare workers, and so we did that as a priority, frontline workers in the hospital. So that includes all the custodial staff, et cetera. And then we went to doing people in the community 65 and over. So we had extensive outreach to our retirees, our faculty. We're planning for in-person. So we consider them, some of them frontline as well. And so we really have been trying to make an effort to get as many people vaccinated as possible. And that has gone well, to be quite honest. And the only issue has been not getting vaccine. We were not part of the distribution last week. And late last week, we found out we would receive more doses this week. However, we are yet to receive any doses. So sometimes when I hear, conversations about whether or not we have run out of vaccine, we haven't run out. We can only vaccinate, up to the number of vaccines we're giving, and we don't control that part of the supply chain, unfortunately.
Okay, let's kind of break some of that down because you gave us a lot there.
Yeah.
How many vaccines have been administered so far?
Yeah, so we've given probably over about 2,000 vaccines to employees and probably another 1,600 to people in the community.
Okay, all right. And about how many more vaccines are you waiting for to receive this week, for example?
We're hoping, it appears that we're getting a number such that we're getting roughly about 975 doses. On Friday, this coming Friday, we plan on giving people their second doses who received their first doses when we open it up to the public for 65 and over. But we are hopeful that if we get another set of vaccine in between Thursday and Friday, we'd be able to give some more people their first doses. And obviously there's a discussion taking place now in the medical community as to whether it's advantageous to go ahead and give the first doses only and not hold any doses back for the second dose. And I think that's still a bit controversial. It does cause me some concern. The clinical trials that were done on the vaccine we're distributing, which is the Pfizer vaccine, were done with 2 doses being given. And I think that that's something that we've got to respect and continue to watch the data. But we'll see what the CDC guidelines, CDC direction, is.
So as of now, moving forward, you're only going to do the initial vaccine and then the booster. You're not going to, you're going to save those vaccines for, that you currently have for what?
Yeah, we're going to give the second doses as planned. Any excess we get this week, we'll give as first doses. But there's a possibility, to be quite honest, by the end of this week, the new guidelines could be to give everybody one dose, don't hold any doses for a second dose, and with guarantees that the second doses will be coming. Remember, the part of the issue here is that we have to wait until the doses are sent to the Department of Health. And then we also are dependent on the Department of Health distributing doses as well. So it's not in our control. And obviously, we want to make sure that people get the best outcome from getting the vaccine, and the clinical trials were done with 2 doses. And so we have to keep that in mind.
One of the things that you mentioned several times is one of the things that causes a lot of concern for people. That CDC keeps changing things. They'll say one thing one day, and 2 days later, they'll say something else. Yeah. And that raises concern for a lot of individuals regarding these vaccines. How you speak to that?
Yeah, you know, again, this is a very unusual situation. I mean, obviously, I've been practicing surgery for some time, and most of the adopted things that we do in the medical community have been tried and tested. And we do that based on, you know, reams of evidence over time, right? So you need 2 things. You need large volumes of experiences, or large volumes of patients in clinical trials, or multiple trials for that matter. And then you need time. Over time, we say this works or it doesn't, and you tweak it. All of this now has been compressed into a very short period of time, as well as using a very limited number of patients in clinical trials. And so one of the things that has to happen is that evolution of our knowledge. So for instance, we will get more information from actually giving people the vaccine than we would have gotten from the trials. The trials would have included, you know, tens of thousands of people in each clinical trial, but we've given millions of doses of the vaccine now. So if we were collecting good data at present about what was happening, side effects, you know, who was getting infected after getting the vaccine. I mean, that's the data that over the next few months, hopefully will start coming out. And that would actually give us a little more experience. So unfortunately, we're in this period of time where there will be some fluidity, and there will be things that will change. And that's not what we're used to in our medical system. And that will cause confusion. So you're actually right. You know, I think the CDC and other public health authorities are trying to do their best to manage what is a very complicated circumstance. And then when you add on all of these logistical issues, such as manufacturing, distribution, the supply chain impact, it does get confusing, unfortunately. And I think it's going to stay like that for some time.
So if someone says, well, you know what, I'm going to wait and get a vaccine once all this confusion is over with, how do you respond to that?
Yeah, you know, my recommendation is, if you qualify to get the vaccine, based on the best evidence we have now, and all of the safety information, you should get that vaccine now. And the reason for that is that the more that people wait, my concern, especially if the African-American population in particular is at the back of the line in terms of getting the vaccine, I think that we run the risk of being more exposed, right? And so I've received the vaccine, but here what my concern is, let's say the vaccine hesitancy that's in the African-American community continues, and it even rises and people wait. I am concerned that as more white people get the vaccine, the urge to open up the economy is going to grow. It's going to grow fairly strong. And when we start doing that, unfortunately, if those people go to restaurants, they start going to the grocery more regularly, they will start exhibiting behaviors that will put the rest of us at risk, right? Because they've had the vaccine, and to some extent, people are going to feel that gives them a certain, amount of shield, as it were. So they're going to start dropping their guard. Wearing masks will be less, washing their hands, keeping distant. And then the frontline workers, people who look like us. And those are the people who now would not have received a vaccine because of their vaccine hesitancy and would be at risk. And they will want to go back out to work as well, right? Because as the economy opens up and restaurants start opening back up, et cetera, there will be an eagerness to get out and earn a living. And I just worry that that could put more African Americans at risk, and I'm very worried about that.
So if I were to get the vaccine and the booster, then are you telling me I should still be worried about getting the virus?
Yeah, so the way the studies were done, the vaccine prevented severe illness. So the chance of hospitalization, from a severe bout of COVID and possibly death was decreased substantially by taking the vaccine. So you should still take all the precautions, because your chance of also infecting others and transmitting the virus, although it's decreased, it's not zero. So if you contract the virus, while you may not get very sick, as a matter of fact, you could even be asymptomatic because you've taken both shots. But that's not fair to everybody else around you, because then you could be the source of, infection to the others around you. And so everyone still has to continue doing that until we really have the caseload almost annihilated, as is the circumstance, for instance, in Australia.
Is there anyone who should not get this vaccine?
Yes, I think people should consult with their physicians. If you've had a major allergic reaction in the past to getting a vaccine or any type of injection, you should consult with a physician about it. And there should be consideration given to not taking the vaccine as a result. But that should be, everyone who signs up for it should touch base with their primary care physician to ensure it's safe for them to take the vaccine.
Now, will you be requiring faculty and staff and even students to show proof that they have been vaccinated?
Yeah, I have to be honest, we have not made a decision about that. I'll tell you, my gut is no. My gut is to just focus on educating everyone about getting the vaccine and trying to get a significant number of our population, students, faculty, and staff vaccinated. And I think if we do that, we stay away from having to mandate everybody taking the vaccine, and we stay away from the back and forth controversy around that issue.
And the last question before we move on to the next subject, you said that you have been vaccinated. How do you feel? Have you had any reaction to it whatsoever? Or
yeah, and just to clarify, so I still operate. As a matter of fact, I operated just last week. And so I am in the hospital every day making rounds with the students, et cetera, and residents, and obviously seeing patients in clinics. So I was vaccinated for that reason. I also have sickle cell, and I'm a type 1 diabetic who takes insulin. So I have comorbidities. I had soreness in my arm the day that in my shoulder, I should say specifically, the site of the injection. The next day I had what I would describe as general myalgias, so muscle pains, generalized, which is not unusual as your immune system, reacts. And when a bed, probably a little earlier, got up the next day and I was fine. The second shot, similar symptoms. The only difference is the myalgias I had on the second day, I experienced on the first day, and same thing, went to bed earlier and, was fine by the next day. So very, very mild reaction.
Okay. Let's talk about reopening campus. When do you expect the larger number of students and faculty and staff to return to campus?
I think based on where this is heading, and I hate again to be looking into a crystal ball, as it were. I mean, I think anybody who predicts much about this pandemic is probably likely to be wrong. I'm hopeful that the fall we'll be able to get back to in-person instruction. We are going to attempt to have a pilot in the summer where we'd like to open up some in person. We'd even like to have some of the current freshmen who will be rising sophomores potentially even come to campus and stay in the dorm, so that we could give them some semblance of the experience that they may have missed in the event that they're interested in taking summer classes. But again, that's an evolution. We have to obey the city rules and the city guidelines, and we need to be clear about that. This is not simply a Howard decision. It's not simply a Wayne Frederick decision. It's a decision that has to be made based on the prevailing national guidelines and the local DC Department of Health under which we operate. And on the issue of mandatory vaccinations as well, DC does have a rule. If you 25 and younger, and you go attend one of our colleges and universities in the city, there are mandatory vaccinations they expect you to have in order to allow you to live in the residence halls, et cetera. That's part of DC regulations. Whether or not they add a COVID-19 vaccine to that, we have to wait and see. If they do, then obviously it will be mandatory for us to require that.
And that decision, again, will come from the mayor or the Department of Health? That's correct. Yeah. And what about teleworking and telelearning? Will that still be offered?
Yeah, we're going to offer it. I'm pretty sure, just like everywhere else in the country, we're going to have people who are resistant to coming back on campus and don't want to take the risk. And we're going to do our best to try to accommodate them. We've been, I think trying to accommodate that on many different levels. We didn't lay off any staff or faculty. We didn't subject anybody to furloughs, and we also didn't stop paying any benefits. Probably one of the few institutions that took that approach. We employ more African-American faculty than anybody else in the country. And so I felt if we can tighten our expenditures and really watch that closely, we could see if we could keep people employed, have them keep their health insurance, at this time. And you have to remember, people have spouses and partners who may have lost their jobs as well. That changes the whole family and home dynamic as well. And so that's also, difficult as well. So I thought it was important that we give that an effort. And as we get into the fall, we have to be thoughtful about that. Are there faculty members who, have comorbidities and they're apprehensive about coming to campus, et cetera? We're going to try to assure them that most people are vaccinated. So hopefully they'll be safe. We'll take whatever measures we have to take in terms of the classrooms and so on to make it safe. But at the end of the day, we're going to have to respect people's desire if they don't want to come to campus. We know the students want to come back. Mm-hmm. And we also know from a mental health perspective, it's going to be critical for the students to come back. Students are having a tough time with mental health.
Yeah. And I definitely want to talk about that, but you said something that I'm curious about. You said you're going to assure the faculty and staff that a lot of the students have been tested. So how are you going to even know whether or not your students have been tested or not?
No. I said I want to assure that the campus is safe. In terms of testing, we actually put up a dashboard that's online on our website that gives all our testing results. It shows how many people we test every week, how many have tested positive, what category they're in, if they're students, faculty, or staff. And we're going to continue to do that. We'll continue to publish that information into the fall as well. We have a Bison Safe app that I have to fill out just like everyone else every time I come on campus, as I did today. And that, it asks about symptoms, et cetera. It displays a barcode that lets you know whether or not you're safe to come on campus. And we're going to have to institute that as well. So it asks about the typical symptoms that one might experience with COVID as well.
And can you talk a little bit more about how it was able to not lay off anyone, not furlough anyone? You said, you control the expenditures. If you would talk a little bit about what exactly Howard had to do to ensure that financially you weren't hit harder in terms of your faculty and staff.
I would say this was difficult, as you can imagine. Now, some of the circumstances lend themselves to making it work. Obviously, we didn't have travel because travel was shut down, so we were able to limit that in the budget. Gatherings and so on, we were able to limit what we were doing there as well. But then we had everyone go back and look at all of the contracts under each cabinet member and look at them very closely. And where we felt we had an opportunity to renegotiate a contract, we certainly took up the opportunity to do that, to decrease our expenses. And where we felt we had an opportunity to probably cancel something because the activity was suspended or it would not have resulted in the right types of outcomes because of the circumstance we were in with social distancing, et cetera, then we shut those down as well. And we made an aggressive effort to do that. And I have to commend the campus, everybody, students with their activities. We suspended, remember, we also suspended student fees and so on, but yet we still budgeted monies for all of the student organizations, and those are usually paid with the student activity fee. I pay that out of my own budget as an example, but again, students, faculty and staff, administrators all made an effort to kind of curb, our expenditures, and it has worked well. Our salary and benefits, when you see our final outcomes, may show an increase for two reasons. One is that we gave the faculty a 3% increase as of last Friday for the spring semester. And we also have had an increase in benefits because of some, accounting treatments to the benefit packages. So our line item there is going to show an increase year over year, but it's going to be primarily from, passing on a faculty raise and accounting treatments of benefits.
And will Howard be implementing student fees in the fall?
Yes, we will. We'll be expecting, like I said, our hope is to have in-person classes, and so we would be expecting to do that.
Good. Mental health, you touched on that, and obviously that's a major factor with COVID. Talk a little bit about what Howard is doing regarding mental health, not only, again, for the faculty and the staff, but also for incoming students.
Yeah. So on the mental health front, we've really tried to expand our employee assistance program so that we can afford more services. The Howard University Staff Organization has also been very active in terms of participating in standing up different activities to engage the staff. So for example, we have the staff organization has set up some happy hours virtually, of course. They've used a DJ from WHUR. Part of that has been, some serious talk about mental health, mental wellness, those types of things, but also, they've had some fun with it around homecoming. We did one. So they've been doing an activity like that almost every month. And I think that's healthy for people to get together in some way, shape, or form. On the student front, we've really tried to expand the university counseling services. The students also have been arranging mixers among themselves. Howard students are very social, so they're not going to let a pandemic keep them away from, trying to connect. And so they've been doing that.
But they've been doing that over Zoom.
Yeah, yeah, virtual mixer, not getting together, but doing virtual mixers, catching
make
up
sure we said friends. That. Okay.
Right. Absolutely. And okay. The university counseling services have been virtual and online. And I'll say, Keith, as well, that this is a serious issue. I mean, I have a 16-year-old son and a 14-year-old daughter. My daughter, prior to the pandemic, was very outgoing, and this took a toll on her, on her mental health, and we had to get help to help her with that. She's very outgoing, plays volleyball, gets involved in a series of things, and she wasn't able to do that for months, and I saw the impact on it. So I think the other thing that's instructive to me is that while I talk to students and hear that as well, I also see it in my own home, and I recognize the impact that keeping students away, the impact that it has. So we don't take these decisions lightly, but we also have to recognize that having a large African-American faculty body, those are faculty members that are at risk. And so we have to put health and safety first.
So it sounds like, are you suggesting that, even before students get to Howard's campus, that maybe their parents might want to consider some mental health or some evaluations just being checked out even before they even arrive on campus?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say over the course of the past 3 to 5 years, we've seen a significant spike in the utilization of mental health services on campus, and we've been expanding it every year to the point where, I'll be honest, I think it's hard to keep up. But I think there are few universities where you wouldn't hear that from, you know. There are significant numbers of things that are going to happen that I think are going to be critical for us to keep an eye on with that in general, substance abuse, you know, alcoholism. I mean, there's a lot of pressure that we're seeing bubbling to the surface. Not probably unlike when we were in college, just that it wasn't mainstream probably to talk about your mental health struggles.
And that's what I want to talk about that. I want to, you know, we're about to go down a different avenue. I want to address that. I mean, you know, in our culture, you know, folks say, well, you got a mental issue, you go to church. All you need is a little bit more Jesus. You know, talk a little bit about that. I mean,
that's not the case. I mean, I'll tell you, you know, I lost my dad to suicide a month shy of my 3rd birthday. And for years, that was not something that I spoke about. As a matter of fact, my mother has never directly told me how my father died, as an example. And I just think that taboo has existed in our communities for a while. And we've come to accept that. And I think we, you know, as you're just pointing out, I think how we have approached mental health has probably not been the right way. We're in an era now where it's not as stigmatized, and we actually encourage people to engage. And I think that that's the right thing to do. It's been long overdue, but it also means that we've under-resourced these areas for a long time. It means that these are areas where we needed more personnel, more opportunities to engage. We should have been at the crest of, you know, having online services, anonymous ways to contact, you know, and get help and so on. So what we're doing now is trying to catch up to what, to your point, may have been something that always existed and we just weren't dealing with it well, you know?
Yeah. Well, quick question for you. If people are interested in getting a vaccine, let's say over the age of 65 or they're a frontline worker, who do they contact at Howard University Hospital to make sure that they get that next dose of that vaccine?
We have an online setup to make an appointment, and I'll have the Alumni Relations Office send that out after this call, where you can go. It's totally online, that you can make your appointment, et cetera, ask you a series of questions, and then you can make an appointment, come in and see us.
And what about those individuals who may not be online, 65 or older, and they may not have access to the internet?
Yeah, they can call in as well. I will tell you, because I've heard the DC Department of Health head speak about this, and this is a little bit of, you know, controversy across the country, where people are like, well, you know, African Americans don't have access and so on, and that just doesn't seem to be the case. I mean, we vaccinated I want to say a young lady of 103 years old, and she was able to make an appointment, you know, had resources around her to try to get that. And so I think there are a couple of things on this point in particular. You know, I think some of the assumptions that the national media sometimes make about the African American community, we just aren't seeing, including around vaccine hesitancy, I have to say. You know, lots of people have been signing up as well. We are participating in the Novavax trial as well. So while there are 2 vaccines available and you can qualify to get it, we have people who have been signing up to participate in a clinical trial, knowing that they may get a placebo, you know. And the reason Novavax included Howard is because they want to get more African Americans represented in the trial. And so Morehouse and Meharry are participating as well. And we're accruing patients at a pretty significant clip as well, you know. So it means that the education that has been ongoing from us about these things, I think, has been having an impact. So I think there is a balance. You're absolutely right. Some people are going to be challenged, and we have opportunities for them to call in and we can provide assistance, but we're trying to do most of it online.
And if they were to call in, they would just call Howard University Main Hospital?
The faculty practice plan, and we can distribute that number as well.
Okay, all right. What about, how are the applications for admission this year? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, good question. You know, last year, higher ed suffered a 3.4% decline in enrollment across the board. And, you know, Howard was fortunate that we had a 17% increase in enrollment. I remind people that that includes people who are applying in 2019, and the deadline date was February 15th. So right before really everything got shut down, we had a significant increase in applications. And then people made a decision to come to us even before VP Harris was named as the vice president nominee. So I just want to be clear that Howard's results, solutions to the problems ahead of us, offerings are a big attraction. And in this cycle, so far, we have about a 16 to 20% increase. And that increase is significant.
That's year over year?
That's year over year. We are trending such that we will probably have about 30,000 applications this year. And to put that in context, I think the year that I took over, we had about 9,000. So it's a significant increase over that period of time.
Wow. Let's talk about commencement.
Sure.
Well, yeah, commencement will be in May.
Yeah.
Only before commencement, Char Day. Char Day is next month. So let's start with Char Day and then go to commencement. And then, of course, homecoming. Let's go in that order. What can we expect?
I would say, for Charter Day, we obviously are going to have to do something virtual. And we're mapping that out. We'll be releasing that fairly soon in terms of what we're going to do. We're going to get together virtually and really focus on fundraising. During that period of time, it's a big fundraising opportunity for us. And so we certainly will continue to keep that theme and have a virtual event where we can celebrate the founding of the university. We'll be 154 years old. And I think it is important for us to pause and recognize the university's founding, especially in this period of time. There's lots of reasons for us to think back about that birth and some of the things that it has created. The most racist president in our history, arguably, was the 17th president, Andrew Johnson. And he was the one that signed the charter on March 2nd, 1867, that created a university that created the first Black, or at least participated in the formation of the first Black vice president. Mm-hmm. And so our democracy is messy, but it works at the end of the day. And so I think it's important for us to pause and, remember that. And I would say also, I take the opportunity to say it's also to remember this 80,000 living alum who every day are blocking and tackling in our communities and doing the work that is important, right? I mean, when we talk about the pandemic and the impacts and the food banks and so on, there are thousands and tens of thousands of Howard alum out there on the front lines, making those things happen. Mm-hmm. Commencement is a difficult.
Well, before we go to commencement, any idea who the Charter Day speaker will be?
No, not yet.
Okay. All right. All right. Commencement.
All right. Commencement. Again, I think a difficult situation right now. Based on the DC law, we're not going to be able to have commencement in person right now. Even with an outdoor event, the DC laws around gatherings and so on, as you saw, even with the inauguration, you wouldn't be able to do it. And so we have to see what happens over the course of the next month or two. It's not something that we can plan on a whim and a fancy. So unless something changes very soon, it's going to be a very difficult path to trying to have a commencement in person.
Okay. Homecoming in the fall, October.
Yeah, homecoming in the fall is a little further down the road, and we'll see. I'm hopeful that the state of vaccinations across the country are such that what we're doing as a country in terms of being able to engage and interact would allow us to, have more engagement along the lines of what we would do at homecoming. But again, right now, if the situation stays as is, or if any of these variants create a reversal in the number of cases that have been declining, that also will be in jeopardy.
And thank you for bringing up the variants. I mean, here we are. You're trying to get people vaccinated, and now we've got South African variant. We've got the European variant. You know, what role does these variants play in people going out and getting vaccines?
Yeah, you know, it's going to be critical. The variants are going to be difficult in terms of what they may cause us in terms of the infection rate, et cetera. So that definitely is going to be a challenge. Right now, it sounds like some of the vaccine makers are looking into making a booster that will attack basically, or at least present some portion of the variant to one's immune system and therefore build immunity to the variant. So we may be looking at boosters targeted at the variants. But the key is the quicker we get a large number of people vaccinated, so we get to the herd immunity, shutting down the passage of the virus from person to person ultimately is what is going to bring the virus and the pandemic to an end. And so even with the variants out there, as more people get vaccinated, that still will help. Because remember, the response that we're seeing so far to the variants, while it's not as robust, it's still on the order of about 50% of the people are developing significant immunity and avoiding severe infection. And so again, the process that we still have with the vaccines that have been developed can shut this down if we have widespread vaccination and therefore widespread immunity.
Let's talk a little bit about the financial impact of COVID on Howard. And you obviously you touched a lot on that already, but I want to, if we can kind of capsulize a little bit more, if we can.
Yeah.
How has COVID, if you were to just give a direct answer, a straight sentence, how has COVID affected Howard financially?
Yeah, it's been a significant impact. When you look at revenue, so let's start with the revenue base. You know, the way our dorms are set up now, 90% of our beds are 5 years or younger from renovations, et cetera. So we have housing partners. And so they really ate most of the loss of not having anyone in. If we were still the primary ones collecting the revenue, because basically the deals that we had is they put up the money to renovate the dorms, and now we pay them back by them getting the revenue from the students who stay in the dorm. When there are no students, they take the hit. And so that financial...
who is they again?
The housing partners, like Campus Apartments and Corvius, et cetera. And so that insulated us somewhat from that, but still there's some areas in that, like Bethune is still, that revenue all comes to us. So we got a decline in that revenue. We had an increase in enrollment, like I said, year over year. So that helped us, obviously, from that perspective. In terms of the other thing that COVID really hurts us on is a lot of the preparation we had to make in order to manage the campus, right? So we had to shut the hospital down for any elective care and only take care of COVID patients for some time. So that just created the revenue from the hospital as well as the practice plan significantly, because there's no other way for us to manage that. We also had to spend money to assist students with getting home. We also cut students' payments for housing at the end of the spring semester last year. Then we cut all the student activity fees, et cetera, coming into this semester. And we also turned around and gave students about $8 million worth of financial aid extra from what we had done the year before, recognizing the hardship that some families were entertaining. So when you add it all up across the campus, in terms of the negative impact, in terms of dollars, we probably had a decline of somewhere in the order of $50 to $75 million when all of those things are added up. So the expense tightening that I've been talking about, some of it came naturally because, for instance, like utilities are down, but that's not to the tune of $50 to $70 million, as you can imagine. And so we just had to tighten around the other things that we were doing. Travel is not on the order of that, but every little bit counts. And that's what we had to do in terms of managing the expenses.
And what about the recent stimulus bills? Is there any money in these stimulus bills for the university? And so how much and where?
Yeah, there are two tranches of money in the stimulus bill that we argued for successfully. One was, that goes to all universities, and it's a pot of money that is really directed at students. So we'll be passing that on to students as well. And then there's a line item, because we do not participate in type 3 funding that the HBCUs participate in. There's a line item in there as well for $20 million. So those things help buffer our losses on the revenue side that I was speaking to earlier as well.
I heard $20 million, but I didn't hear the first number. What was the first number?
And the first number, I believe, was about 12.4 million. But half of that, the way the law is written, it's a little complicated, and they do it based on your enrollment, the number of Pell Grant students you have. The way the law is written, half of it has to be passed on directly to the students. And so, although it's 12 point something million that comes to us, half of it goes directly to the students. And they don't have to pay our bills with it. They can use it for whatever bills they may have incurred. So it also does not come back to us. So just to clarify that as clearly as I could.
And what about fundraising or even donations from alumni? Have they gone up, down, flat because of COVID? What are you saying?
So I would say that has been a bright spot for the university, and I definitely want to take an opportunity to applaud our alum around this issue in particular. Year over year, we've doubled the number of alum who have actually given to the university. So our alumni giving rate, as I sit here today at the end of November into December, was as high as 9%. You remember probably when I took over, the alumni giving rate for the entire year was 4.96%. But year over year.
So wait a minute, it's gone from almost 5%.
Yeah, it was
90 to 90%.
No, not 90, 9.0. That's 9. Right. But remember, we're halfway through the year. So my point is the trajectory we're on suggests that we can get in that 15 to 20% range, which for us would be a tripling to quadrupling of the alumni giving rate, which is fantastic. And year over year, like I said, through the first half of the year, we've already doubled the number of alum actually who've given. So the percentage would be higher. But remember, every year we're adding another class. And also as our database gets better, we're expanding our alum denominator that this gets calculated out of. And by the way, that's our undergrad alumni giving rate, just to clarify. But that's what the national databases use, as a benchmark for what your alum are doing in terms of giving to the university. So we have had some big donations, but the thing that I would say I'm most proud of is the fact that our alum, have been stepping up and giving to the university.
And what about the graduate school level? I mean, you got doctors and lawyers out there. How is that looking?
Yeah, it's a mixed bag. I think our med school alum give back significantly. However, to be quite frank with you, we have a little bit of a fractured process there. We have a Howard University Medical Alumni Association, and a lot of people sometimes are confused that if they give to that organization, they're giving to the university, and that's not the case. That's an independent organization that people may give to. So I think when you put what people give to that organization and directly to the university, I think the medical school alum do a good job. The dental school alum have been stepping up, especially around one of the programs, the pediatric dentistry program. And the law school alum, have continued to be strong supporters of the university and the law school specifically. So I do think our graduate and professional schools do garner some pretty steady and good support.
And what about the gifts? I mean, obviously Howard has been in the news quite a bit over the last year about major multi-million-dollar gifts. Talk a little bit about that. Is there a total number? How much has come in so far? And moving forward, are you finding that people are saying, well, Howard doesn't need my money. They just got $100 million gift from so-and-so. I mean,
that I hope that that's not what people say, because that's not the case. I mean, I remind you that 46% of our undergrad students are Pell Grant eligible. So their ability to pay the bill is really compromised. And I would also remind you that we charge anywhere from 25 to 40% less than our peers. So what we bring in terms of tuition is not enough to cover the bills. And also the federal appropriation that we get as a line item covers about 28% of our revenue. So we do need significant contributions, and these contributions have been significant. In the calendar year of last year, we probably cumulatively raised well over $100 million, which again, back in 2012, we were raising $8 million a year. So it's a significant increase, significant direction. And also prior to the pandemic, we had 4 of the 5 largest gifts ever given to the university in that academic year. So we clearly have been building our infrastructure. We're reaching out beyond the university. So prior to the Mackenzie Scott gift and the Bloomberg Philanthropy gift, we were raising funds. But I want to be clear, when those funds come in, they don't get spent all in that year, right? If you get a gift, for instance, the Bloomberg Philanthropy gift as an example, the purpose is to discount the loans that students have to take out by at least 100,000. So you're doing that for every class. So the freshmen are going to get 25,000 a year. So you're spending that money over a 4-year period. That's not, going to show up as affecting the bottom line, just all in 1 year. The Mackenzie Scott gift was an unrestricted gift. That's a different kind of gift. We could spend the $40 million all in 1 year. That wouldn't be wise, right? So what we've tried to do is to put a significant portion in the endowment. We've used a significant portion of it in this current year to pay student bills, et cetera. And then our hope is that we would gain some interest from that over time and also use it for different programs, et cetera, as well as we use some for faculty retention. We use some for physical plant improvements, et cetera. But the point is, we don't want to spend all 40 million in 1 year. You want to, try to make that gift be the gift that keeps on giving over time.
A couple of questions here as to how can alumni give back if they wish to give? Of course, they wish to give. We talk about that right now. How can they give? And also a couple of questions on some of these virtual alumni gatherings. How do they find out about these virtual alumni gatherings? I would assume they would reach out to the local chapters for that. But if you want to take either of those two.
Yeah, certainly their local chapters. But I would also say the Howard University Alumni Association has been doing a good job of putting on events and pushing those events out into the community. And so I think they definitely should, follow the Howard University Alumni Association as well and get involved, become a member. They push a lot of information out. On the issue of giving, obviously you can go to the website and give at howard.edu /give, and you can see information there. But I'll take it one step further. I want alum, especially who are going to give, to also engage with the university, engage with the development office, and understand what the gifts they're using for. Even if you write an unrestricted gift, I do want people to engage with our development officers and have a conversation about what the money is used for, how it's done, what we do in terms of giving people information back about what their gift was used for, that type of thing. Because I think that engagement is important. And I've stressed this even like around homecoming. I think it's great to come in town and party and have a good time and see your friends, but we have open houses now where you can meet the dean and you could meet students and you could, sit in a classroom and understand what research is taking place in your school. And I think it's just as important to do that. So I do want people to give, but I also want them to hold us accountable in a different way, right? In a way in which you come and you understand what's happening. So when you hear what we're doing, you're clear. I think I conducted the transaction with Meridian Hill sometime around 2015, 2016. And still today, I hear, we're selling property. We didn't sell the property. We leased the property to a developer. They develop the property. And after that lease arrangement is up, the property comes back to us. So, to manage a short cash crunch, it was the right thing to do. I inherited a university that was losing over $60 million a year. The hospital alone was losing $60 million a year. And you can't just raise prices and have the students pay. We had 60% Pell Grant students at that time. We're down to 46%. But the reality is we are still charging 25 to 40% less, right? We weren't paying our faculty.
When you say 25 to 30% less than who? Less than what?
Yeah, less than our peers, right? We are a high research university. Let's just use the city, for instance. You know, Georgetown, their tuition is about 42 or 40 something thousand. It's probably almost twice what ours is. This is an example. So I'm being generous when I say 25 to 40% less. But the point is that means that you're bringing in less revenue. And when you have an aging campus, as we do, then the money that fixes that aging campus has to come from somewhere as well. So that's also another difficult exchange and tough choices that have to be made as well, you know.
Okay. We have about a half hour to go. We've got a lot of things on this list. So are you basically saying that if someone gives money to their graduate of the School of Social Work, then they can help determine where that money and how that money is being used in that particular school?
Absolutely. And depending on how much money people give, you know, we have donor agreements that we have to honor with people who give money to the university. I'm a donor to the university. I benefited immensely from the education. And so I have, 3 or 4 scholarships. I've, donated to a simulation lab, but all of those things have donor agreements, So in the event of my untimely death, my kids, that's part of the instructions I give my kids, that their responsibility is to, kind of maintain those donor agreements, to check in with the university, see how those things are going, and to make sure that the purpose for which we started the gift is still being fulfilled.
And how does one enter into a donor agreement?
Yeah, by discussing that with our development office,
Okay.
What your intent is, how much you can give, and how you'd like to see that used over time,
Okay, let's talk about the facilities and capital plan. Let's talk a little bit about updates on Blackburn and Douglas and Rankin and the Undergraduate Library. Where do things stand with those buildings?
Yeah, so first let me start with Rankin. Rankin Chapel is in a state of disrepair. We've been having chapel in Crampton, partially because of the size, but the reality is Rankin is not in a state in which we could have chapel in there. The walls have taken on a significant amount of water because of the gutter system. I mean, it's an older building that needs a lot of work. And so a couple of years ago, I had a donor give us $250,000 to conduct that work in terms of what needed to be done. And that was how much it cost just to get an evaluation of what needed to be done. And that project easily to renovate it, expand it, to do what we have, I don't think it's going to cost us any less than 20-25 million. And that's just an educated guesstimate, right? We now have to try to look at what all the different options are going to be, et cetera. And I'd love to see us return the chapel on Sundays back to the chapel, but we have to there's no elevator in there that, so even going down into the basement is a challenge. I mean, there's several things about it. There's no HVAC system. I mean, it's a very old building with a lot of work that would need to be done.
So the chapel, you're saying needs an elevator? I mean, maybe a ramp, but an elevator?
Yeah, in the chapel itself, to go down to like the rectory.
Yeah.
There's stairs that we have right now. Okay. So for elderly folks, it's not an easy transition to go up and down those stairs. You don't have a heating and cooling system that's effective. There's several things about it that would need a significant improvement.
Is there a time frame that we're looking at for Rankin?
We're looking at it right now. We just had a meeting recently. We're going to have to get a number, a target. We're going to have to go to the National Historic Society, Historic Preservation Society, and have a discussion with them as well about, what we can and cannot do, given the age of the building and, the foundation. I mean, there's everything about the building, the roof, every single thing is going to need some work. And so we're going to have to engage. So I don't have a hard timeline, but I can tell you that internally, the work is afoot to try to get an assessment of what that would take.
What about Douglas?
Douglas, I walked through last week. So work is coming along. People are making a lot of effort there, and that's heading in the right direction. We plan on having it reopened in August. You know, I'm a little bit nostalgic, so restoring it is a combination of two things, right? I want it to be more contemporary for the kind of classroom space we should have at a university like ours, but at the same time, you know, having walked those halls for the past 30-something years, there are things about it that, you know, are still unique to it. And so we want to preserve some of those things as well. So we're trying to find a good balance of modernization as well as contemporizing it. And then the faculty had a significant number of offices in there. We want to, you know, restore that in a nice way, but again, in a very modern way with technology, et cetera. And we want to put the Cub Lab back in there as well. And so that,
I'm sorry, what kind of lab?
The Cub Lab, the Montague Cub Lab. So those artifacts need, you know, significant temperature and humidity control in the space that they're in. And so we intend to accomplish all of that. With what I saw, I think the team has worked really hard on it, and it looks good. What they showed me last week was exciting. So it looks good.
So August, Douglas will be reopening after how many years?
Yeah, a couple, 2 years. Well,
2 years.
3 years.
3 years. Wow.
Yeah.
What about Blackburn?
Blackburn is undergoing a renovation as well. It'll be ready sometime this summer. I haven't had a chance to walk through that yet, but I know they're making progress. I've seen some of the finishes that they're thinking of using, et cetera. So I'll get a chance, hopefully, in the next month or two to take a walk through there and see what the progress.
What is being done there? What is being done at Blackburn?
Again, a full renovation of the ballroom, several things. You know, top to bottom, a lot is being done in there.
Okay. And what about, of course, Undergraduate Library?
Yeah, Undergraduate Library, it was supposed to be done at the end of January. I last saw it in December, and it looks fantastic. That's probably the building that I'm going to be most fond of. I spent a lot of time in that building in particular as a student, and seeing what it looks like today is absolutely incredible.
Will there be a new Howard University hospital, or are there plans on building a new facility?
Yeah, the plan is to build a new facility. I think we should broaden that thought process. We need a new academic medical center, right? I think the pandemic has revealed to all of us that you need more healthcare professionals of color. You need more people that are that are culturally competent in order to try to close the healthcare disparities. So I think as an institution that has produced more African-American physicians than anyone else and sends more African-Americans to medical school, we should have to seriously think about expanding our medical school class. We're licensed to do 130 incoming class. We probably need to figure out a way to get to 200. But that also means that you need new facilities. We are one of the few universities in America that has a dental school, a pharmacy school, nursing and allied health school. All three of those schools need new facilities yesterday. And so while there's been a lot of talk about the new hospital, what I'm focused on is a new academic medical center. I think that's what's important for us to bring back to the campus and to also, I think, take our health sciences education into the future. So I think we have to think of what are the things that we can do on the curriculum around things like adding AI and algorithms and machine learning, how to use big data science and those types of things. I mean, our anatomy lab is still a cadaver lab, as it was when I was a student. And now when you look at technology, you look at holographs and those types of things. I think we have to look at different things, you know, as well. So I think, you know, all the health sciences programs, really, we have to look seriously at expanding them, because I think we have to put out more competent, more culturally competent healthcare professionals across the board to really close our healthcare disparities. I mean, our healthcare system needs to focus on putting the patient back in the center of it, and our interprofessional education can do that. Is
there a time frame?
So work is underfoot already with the deal that we have with Adventus. The biggest issue for us is really being clear on how much financing we're going to need. and what the source of that financing is, right? Do we get some from the federal government? They were the ones who built Freedman's Hospital, transferred it to us, and built a new hospital as part of that deal. This new hospital is now aged. So one question is, should they be back in, given the public health crisis of healthcare disparities, should they be back in to support that? We obviously got to go out and raise some money as well. And we also may have to go out into the financing markets and get bonds. So it'll be very complicated. You're talking about potentially as much as $1.2 billion.
So you say million with an M or B with
billion
a
with a B.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a lot of money involved. And so again, we have to figure out a way to do that, because again, even our medical school, what we charge as a medical school is significantly less than what others charge as well.
And what about the neighborhood? I mean, obviously the Shaw neighborhood, rents are up, the property, the land is quite expensive now. How has that been both a boon and a bust for Howard? If you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, some of the properties that we've owned, we've been able to sign long-term leases on for developers to come in, but we've also been in the business of trying to purchase as well. Right, so we're looking at some property across from the campus. We also are trying to acquire one of the properties at the corner of Florida and Georgia as well. So, we own the lot that the CVS is on that corner. So, if we're able to acquire that property, we'll own two of the four corners. So we're also in the acquisition business, and I think it's about being strategic and timely around the acquisitions and balancing that again. So I think it's a potential boon for us to be able to acquire those types of properties at this time. And obviously, the gentrification that has taken place has changed the neighborhood. We have to keep reminding everyone that the university and what we are about and how we go about doing things is really important, that people understand why and how and what we're doing and those types of things as well.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear. So in terms of the dormitories,
yeah,
Carver is no longer, correct? Slow
correct.
Is no longer.
Correct.
Sutton Plaza, no longer.
Correct.
Eden Plaza, no longer.
Correct.
So all the dorms are now on campus.
Correct. We've concentrated the residence halls on campus. Sutton and Eaton, just for clarification, were sold back in 1995. Carver and Slow lease agreements that we signed. So we still own the land, and after the leases are up, those properties would be ours as well.
And when you say, so how are they condominiums now, or what are they being used as?
Yeah, they're condominiums, apartment buildings, those two. Sutton and Eaton, like I said, were sold in the 90s, and they are apartment buildings.
Let's talk a little bit about the status. There's a lot of excitement, of course, about in Howard athletics, right? About the deal with Steph Curry and Maker. What do you see as the future regarding athletics at Howard?
Yeah, this is complicated. I see athletics still as a means to an end. And by that, I mean, when we look at the Power Five and what they do in terms of the revenue they bring and
I'm sorry, the Power Five, explain what
Power Five conferences, so SEC, ACC, the Big 12. I mean, those are conferences that are putting a lot of money into athletics. They're paying coaches $7.5 up to $10 million. I think Sweeney at Clemson has a $95 million 10-year contract as an example. And so they have boosters, alum who can throw that money into it. The graduation rate of their Black athletes and the types of majors they get into, how successful they are in life subsequent to that, I would argue, pales in comparison to what we do here at Howard with our athletes. And so I think it's important that when we look at college athletics, we have to be very, very clear that this is not something that we should be taken lightly in terms of what we do. Our graduation rate for our athletes, I believe, is on the order of about 80%. So we really are providing athletes with an education. And I think that that's very important, that we are able to continue to do that. And so I look at athletics as we want to be competitive, but we don't want to lose sight of the fact that these are student athletes and that our primary responsibility is to make sure that they're well educated when they leave here. And that's going to continue to be a strong theme for us as well.
Can we look to see new relationships with other professional athletes, LeBron or anyone out there, or even WNBA players? Or
yeah,
like that?
You know, there are several people that we're speaking to, and I do think you'll see more relationships. I think Black professional athletes in particular are very conscientious about that, but you'll also see us potentially signing deals with some of the major pro sports leagues as well, the NFL, the NBA. We're in discussions, and Major League Baseball, et cetera. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And if you look at even the NHL, we don't play hockey, but the NHL now has significant numbers of Black women in key executive positions. I think that's exciting, you know, as well. You know, looking at that aspect of it as well.
So are you alluding to the fact that Howard might have a hockey team?
No, not at all. But,
okay.
But what I am alluding to the fact is that I think getting some of our students who are interested in sports to get into executive positions and potentially even C-suite is a good opportunity.
I'm sure you've seen it. I've seen it. The controversy that swirled all over social media and the hiring of an Asian American woman to be the editor-in-chief of Howard magazine. Talk a little bit about that so-called controversy, and just how do you respond to that, and what do you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, you came out to the School of Communications. You've had an experience with, you know, kind of who's on the campus, who is in our communications departments, et cetera. One that you could share yourself. But, you know, my perspective is, you know, we always are going to promote African-American hires and African-Americans, but Howard University was never created in an exclusionary manner. And I'm not sure where that comes from. I think we have to be very clear about our history. Our first logo was that of 5 people of different ethnicities. And our first motto was knowledge for all. So that equal opportunity, providing an equal opportunity was always, you know, part of what we do. Obviously, we promote African Americans, you know, primarily, but when people apply, we're going to interview, and sometimes we're going to you know, get candidates that are of a diverse nature. And I think that makes us a better place. The same way we argue for diversity in other arenas, we have to recognize that makes us better as well. I think there's also a little bit of confusion because sometimes I see people write that the person's in the Hilltop. The Hilltop is a student-run newspaper. They're advisors for the Hilltop, and the students basically put forward, they have an interview process and so on for the editor there. The editor-in-chief is for the magazine that we put out, you know, 4 times a year. The journalists who write for the magazine are still African-American, all of them, and they're primarily alum. So the stories they write about and the things they tell about, you know, still the stories that we weren't told. You know, overall, I think it's about also making sure that we have a balance. You know, when I started, we had 1 woman dean. Now 9 of our 13 deans are women, all Black women as well. So, you know, I think questioning whether or not I have a sensitivity to this issue, I think is missing the mark. I don't think that that's the issue at all. And we do have a predominantly African-American staff and leadership, you know, which I think will continue as well. So I think it's about finding a balance.
You know, you talked about the administration when we were students, and I remember Alan Eder,
Alan Herman.
Yes, a white gentleman who was the face and the voice of Howard University. You know, Herman was the face and the voice of Howard University. I remember as a student journalist at the Hilltop, always going to Alan and getting quotes and seeing his name all in the Washington Post and on television. So it's not new for people of different ethnicities to hold very, very high level positions at the university.
Yeah, it's not new. And let me be clear, because I also don't want to get into a space where, how much is just right, whether we shouldn't have it at all, et cetera. We always want to promote our, African-American professionals. We invite and search for those. Like I said, we had an issue, I think, around gender. We didn't have women as, in leadership positions, despite the fact that 70% of our undergrad students are women. And to be quite frank, I think sometimes we have to be a little more honest with who we are, right? We sent an alumna to the White House before we sent a woman to this office I'm sitting in, right? So I think we have to ask ourselves, the tough questions as well. And, I'll be stepping aside from the presidency, and there'll be a search for another president. And I do hope that the Howard community would be aggressive about, seeking a female president, as an example. And I think there's an opportunity there to change the cycle and the trajectory as well.
And you kind of opened yourself up with there, because of course people were like, well, what is he talking about? And you said, I'll be stepping aside. You want to elaborate? You brought that out there. You want to elaborate at all about what you said?
No, I'm saying at some point, I'm not going to be president forever. At some point, and to be clear, I have a contract that's up. And when that contract is up, I think the board has every right to go look for a new president. But my point is just that process is a process that we have to be engaged in and participate, so we see the change that we want to see, rather than criticize the outcomes. I think we have an opportunity to influence that. So I'm the 7th Black man that has been in this office. We've had more white presidents than we've had Black presidents, which I think is something that most of our alum don't even realize. It's a different day, but it also means that the Black presidents have had longer tenures than the white presidents. And that's what really has changed the university as well. Having a Black president in Mordecai Wyatt Johnson changed the trajectory of the university.
Right. How would you describe the Howard culture today? And what is that culture, and how has it changed? And also, what is the culture of the alumni, in your opinion?
Yeah, that's a tough question. That's a tough question for me to answer, because part of culture is people, and part of people are their experiences, right? So when I talk about the Howard culture, I talk about it through the lens of my experience, and sometimes that can be jaded. So for me, the Howard culture was built on the foundation of Black excellence. When I was here as a student and I walked around this campus, what I felt and saw every day was Black excellence. But there also was a humanity about how we interacted with one another that I loved, right? I think people loved people with different accents. I remember having friends from California and New York, and while they listened to different, rappers in particular, there was I think our humanity is what always struck me, that it came out and rose, to the top. Today, we have to remember as well, we are a microcosm of the larger society we live in. And today, because of the nature of social media, and to be quite frank, some of the culture wars we've been through over the last 4 years, it has rubbed off on us, right? The former president, over the past 4 years, has taken our culture to somewhere where it has become raw. It has become acceptable to sit behind a device and say mean things, to send nasty emails, to get on social media and just say anything crass you want about somebody, to threaten to shoot people, right? I mean, just think about it. He came down, he said, there's nothing I can do wrong. I can walk out on Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and they would still vote for me. They would still love me. And while I think the country rejected him through the polls and rejected that through the polls, to some extent, he has dragged all of us there. And so now I see a little bit more of a harshness in the culture. a little bit more of that dehumanizing in the culture, that willingness to, point fingers and assume the worst versus, stepping back for a second and just taking a deep breath and saying, well, I don't know, that guy is a 3-time alum. Why would he not want to see the university thrive? You know what I mean? But the knee-jerk reaction is like, he's the president, so therefore, we must attack him, right? And not to personalize it, but I think with others, we see that, right? We see people on social media say some things about others, and it destroys lives, right? It makes, kids commit suicide over some of these things. And I just think hopefully what we will have, especially in the Howard culture, is that we will lead around holding people accountable. I want to be very clear about that, because this is not about accountability, but I do think that we could do it with a different approach. And we could do it in a way that still preserves our humanity and the best of who we are when we do it as well.
What about reaccreditation? Is that even an issue for Howard?
We had an excellent visit. We had a very strong self-study, an excellent visit. There was a public readout, and we got very, very high marks, and the recommendation was very positive. However, that's not the end of it. The Middle States Commission has to meet, and hopefully we'll be on the docket next month in March, and they're going to vote. And so the first part of the process went well. I believe that one of the faculty leaders has written third-party comments after the fact, which is a little strange and wasn't allowed. And I've been contacted by the Middle States. And so, I'll find out if there's going to be an issue around that and whether or not we'd have to answer to that. But for the visit that they had on campus, the self-study they did and the readout, it was all very positive news. So we'll see what happens in the final vote.
And we got about 5 minutes left. Talk quickly about the Howard Forward plan.
Yeah, that's our strategic plan. I think I've been public. I'm not crazy about strategic plans because I think sometimes people feel that they be all and end all. I think they should be living documents. We should be ever evolving them so that they become something different with time, and we adjust to the circumstance. We launched it pre-pandemic, and then boom, we're in the middle of a pandemic, right? So we now need to kind of reassess where we are. The team has been staying focused on it and doing the right things around it. So it's heading in the right direction. But I still think that we need to keep evolving. I like to see those as living documents. And the other thing that we do oftentimes is a new administration comes in and they throw out everything from the last administration, right? The fact of the matter is none of us have a monopoly on all the good ideas. And what we should do as an organization of this age, 150-something years, is we should be looking for an opportunity to continue to grow over time and building on what has been built before. And recognizing that as we do that, we just get better.
And we've got a couple of minutes left here. With the bison in the White House, with Vice President Harris,
yep.
Can Howard expect a different relationship with the White House than it has had previously? And if so, in what ways at all?
So my short answer is no. My longer answer is absolutely not. And that's because one of the things I hope that we would not do is to put that type of a burden on our alumna. She is not there to be the president, the vice president of Howard University. She's there to be the vice president of the United States. If we do what we're supposed to do, people will not be able to avoid us. They will not be able to ignore us. They will have to fund what we're doing because we are presenting them with the solutions to the nation's problems. And that is what we should be doing for our alumni, making sure we have the best university possible, making sure that when we all come to work, that we do it well, that alum are supporting it, so that when it does come up that, listen, Howard needs more support, she doesn't have to call me and say, well, how many alum give and why aren't alum giving? And what, the questions that people may be asking her to question whether or not the federal government should support, or if there's a rule or a law that may impact the university, she should be bringing up the rear of the guard and not necessarily have to be out front fighting every fight. But that means that we have to have a certain responsibility. Now, the other thing is, this brings a different spotlight on us, right? Because now the VP, the first woman and first African-American, South Asian, is from Howard University. Does that mean that everywhere we go, somebody's going to expect every one of us to almost act a certain way and behave a certain way? I mean, that's what happens when you have great alum. People do look at you just that bit differently. That's what some of the IVs have been using for years, right? Look at our Supreme Court. Right? The Supreme Court doesn't, in my opinion, represent or look like the rest of America. And so this is an opportunity to change that narrative. But all of us have a responsibility every day in what we do. And I think the best way we can support is by being excellent ourselves and having her every day, get compliments about that next Howard alum somebody ran into, or that next Howard student somebody ran into, and how excellent they were. And then that makes it help easier.
All right, thank you, President. We appreciate you talking to us. You're always very candid, President. We do appreciate that. I want to give you the final word, but before I give you that final word, I just want to thank everyone for tuning in and your questions, submitting your questions. I want to thank Howard University for allowing me to be the moderator for this evening. But I want you, sir, to have the final word about talking to the alumni.
Yeah, well, first, I want to thank you, as always, for your direct questioning and for holding me accountable every single day. I appreciate that. And to my alum, first, I want to thank you. I mean, stepping up in the middle of a pandemic and doubling the number of alum who've given to the university says a lot about what you think about Howard University and what it has meant to you. And for that, I have to thank you. I also want to take the opportunity as well to thank you for continuing to be advocates in your community, right? So yes, VP Harris, we're extremely proud of her, and she is going to be on the front page of the news every day. But she knows, just as I do, that there are 80,000 of you out there who are blocking and tackling every day and making the society a better society, fighting the good fight. Speaking up for those who otherwise don't have a voice. And at the end of the day, that's what we are about. Our motto is truth and service. Hopefully you came here to get the truth, and hopefully every day you're seeking it and telling it, and you're out there providing service and turning what you came here and received into a positive and better society. And so for that, I also thank you. And for the faculty and staff in particular during this period of time, they've been absolutely incredible. What they have done in terms of switching to online and supporting the students is great. And again, we thank the students for choosing us, for sticking with us. And we assure them that we're going to continue to provide a high quality education, and we're glad that they're part of our family.
Thank you, everyone. Everyone have a good night.